All right. So are you ready to talk Disney villains?
Always.
Because today we're diving deep
Okay,
into a
gotcha.
list of Disney villains who totally deserve their own live-action movies.
Awesome.
You know, it's funny.
Yeah,
We all love the heroes,
right.
but the villains are often the ones who really steal the show, right?
Right, absolutely.
It's their complexity, their charisma.
hmm
It just makes them so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and you know what? It's like their backstories, you know?
Yes,
You just get these little glimpses of their humanity, and it makes them so intriguing.
exactly. And this list has some truly surprising picks.
Oh, really?
It really gets you thinking about what makes a Disney villain compelling enough
Okay.
to actually carry their own film.
Yeah.
So, all those live-action remakes that Disney's been doing,
hmm
well, we're kind of flipping the script here.
I like it.
We're talking about the villains who are basically begging
Okay.
for their own time in the spotlight.
Interesting.
All right, so before we dive into the top 10, let's start with a few honorable mentions,
Huh.
just to kind of set the stage.
Sounds good.
Okay, so first up, we have Queen Grimhilde from Snow White.
Okay.
Now she's like the OG Disney villain, right?
Oh, yeah, she's a classic.
Classic wickedness, but maybe her story feels a bit too familiar by now.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've seen her story told and retold so many times.
Exactly.
It might be time for some fresh faces.
Yes, exactly.
That's it.
Okay, so next we have Scar from The Lion King.
Ooh, Scar.
Now he's another iconic villain,
Definitely.
but he already got the live-action remake treatment.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's time to shine the spotlight elsewhere.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, and last but not least for our honorable mentions,
Okay.
we have Ursula from The Little Mermaid.
Ah, Ursula.
So she's amazing.
Oh, she's fantastic.
But I just wonder if a live-action version could really capture that underwater magic.
Right. It's like, how would they do it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and plus we kind of already know her whole story. Maybe it's time to give other villains a chance to really shine, you know?
Yes, I agree. Villains with more untapped potential for a standalone film.
Definitely.
All right, so are you ready for our number one pick?
Okay, hit me with it.
This one is Judge Claude Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, wow. Frollo.
So do you remember him?
Yeah, vaguely.
He's that ruthless, self-righteous judge
Okay.
who becomes obsessed with Esmeralda.
Yeah, okay, I remember him now.
Okay, good.
He's intense.
He is intense.
Yeah.
And for me, he's one of Disney's most morally ambiguous villains
It's true.
because you have this religious zealot,
Right.
but he's masking all these really dark desires.
Hmm.
So it's just this really interesting contrast.
Yeah, and think about it visually. A live-action adaptation could be stunning.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
All that Gothic architecture, the grandeur of Notre Dame,
Uh-huh.
maybe even a little bit of that Les Miserables energy.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right.
And the music.
Oh,
A
yeah.
live-action Frollo film could be just as powerful musically as it is visually. Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on from the Gothic streets of Paris
Okay,
to a totally different vibe.
let's do it.
How about Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog?
Oh, Dr. Facilier.
What do you think?
He's so interesting,
I know.
He's got that shadowy, kind of mysterious vibe,
Yeah?
deeply rooted in New Orleans culture and that whole world of voodoo.
It's so cool.
Yeah, do you think a live-action film would lean more into the horror aspects of his character?
That's a good question.
Or would they go more for the musical elements of the story?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think it's a tricky balance because you don't want to lose that New Orleans magic.
Right.
But I think leaning into the spooky side could be really effective,
Oh, yeah.
especially visually.
Yeah, like how would they do that?
Yeah, right.
Capture that visually.
I don't know. I think it'd be really cool, though.
Yeah.
But I think there's room for both.
Oh, for sure.
You could have those darker, suspenseful moments,
Right.
but then break out into those vibrant musical numbers.
That New Orleans is known for. Like, what if it was a darker, more adult version of The Nightmare Before Christmas?
Oh, I love that idea.
Right.
That's a really good comparison.
Okay, so from the spooky streets of New Orleans,
Right.
how about we sail on over to Neverland
Okay.
and talk about Captain Hook?
Oh, Captain Hook.
Now, who wouldn't want to see that flamboyant personality brought to life in live action?
He's a classic.
He is a classic.
For a reason.
Yes.
But what I think is interesting about him is there's so much more to explore beyond just his rivalry with Peter Pan.
Yeah,
Like,
so
what really made him this way?
Yeah.
You know, what events shaped him into this vengeful pirate?
Right.
What drives his obsession with catching Peter?
I know we get glimpses of his backstory, like that whole crocodile situation,
Yeah.
but a live-action film could really delve into those psychological scars,
Oh, totally.
you know,
Yeah.
add a whole new layer of complexity to his character.
Yeah, and what if it, like, flipped the whole good versus evil thing on its head? Like,
Oh,
what if we start to sympathize with Hook a little bit?
okay.
You know, start to understand his pain and his resentment.
Now that would be a twist.
Right.
All right. So we've had Gothic Paris,
Mm-hmm.
spooky New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and whimsical Neverland.
Yeah.
Now, how about we take a trip to Mount Olympus
Okay.
and visit the god of the underworld himself,
Who?
Hades?
Oh, Hades.
What do you think?
He's great.
He's so good.
I almost feel like he's like a prototype
Oh,
for the modern anti-hero, you know?
yes.
He's witty, he's sarcastic,
Uh-huh.
and you almost find yourself rooting for him.
I know.
Even though his schemes are so villainous, you're like, come on, Hades, you got this.
I know. And think about the visuals.
Oh, yeah.
A live-action Hades film could really draw inspiration from classic Greek mythology.
Totally.
But with like a modern stylish twist,
Yeah.
I think it would be a huge hit.
I think so, too.
Okay, so speaking of visual spectacle, how could we forget Chernobog?
Oh, Chernobyl.
That demonic
I
entity
saw.
from Fantasia.
Mm.
I mean, he practically screams epic, big budget CGI.
Oh, yeah, he's all about the visuals.
He is.
But it's like, how do you translate that into an actual story?
That's the question.
Yeah.
How do you translate that into a compelling narrative for a live action film? I don't know it would be a challenge,
It would.
but I think there's potential there.
Okay.
Maybe you could focus on the story of someone who encounters Chernobog.
Okay.
You know, explore themes of fear and temptation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe how facing your darkest fears can actually help you grow.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I like that it's like a very psychological horror film almost.
Oh,
Like Lovecraftian in its scope.
I like it.
Yeah, but it would not be easy to pull off.
No, it wouldn't.
But if they did it well, it could be groundbreaking.
It really could.
Yeah.
All right. So we've had a lot of big, powerful villains so far.
We have.
Let's switch gears again.
Okay.
Talk about a villain who's more about subtle manipulation.
Okay.
Mother Gothel from Tangled.
Oh, Mother Gothel.
So she's not summoning demons or ruling the underworld,
No.
but she's just as terrifying in her own way.
Oh, absolutely she is.
I think so.
Her power is all about deception and emotional manipulation.
Yes.
She's like the embodiment of narcissism and that obsession with youth and beauty,
Uh-huh.
which are themes that are so relevant today.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
In today's world?
Especially today.
Yeah.
And I think a live action film could really delve into those themes.
Yeah.
Imagine exploring the psychological impact of Gothel's manipulations on Rapunzel
Okay.
and how someone can be imprisoned by emotional abuse just as effectively as by physical bars.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
Could be a very powerful story,
It could.
especially for younger viewers who might be dealing with similar things in their own lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of timely issues,
Okay.
let's talk about Clayton, the ruthless poacher from Tarzan.
He's one of those villains who represents a very real threat,
Mm-hmm.
that exploitation of nature for personal gain.
It's true. He's like a classic representation of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think a live-action film could really amplify that environmental message,
For sure.
show the devastating consequences of greed and disrespect for the natural world.
Yeah, and you could have some incredible action sequences, too.
Oh, yeah.
Tarzan swinging through the jungle, Clayton on the hunt.
Yes.
It'd be visually stunning
It would.
and have that message at its core.
Exactly. A visually stunning film with a powerful message
Yeah.
at its core.
You know what I think would be interesting, though?
Yet.
Is if they explored Clayton's backstory a little bit more.
Okay.
Like, what made him so obsessed with hunting?
Oh, yeah.
Is it just greed, or is there something more there?
Ooh, I like that.
You know?
We could get into the psychology of a poacher,
Right.
the thrill of the hunt,
Yeah.
that detachment from the consequences.
Mhm.
It would just add a whole new dimension to his character. Okay, so speaking of adding dimensions to characters,
Yeah.
I think it's time we talk about Yzma.
Oh, Yzma, she's hilarious.
She's so funny.
Yeah.
She's like the comic relief in The Emperor's New Groove.
Right.
But I think there's definitely more to her than meets the eye.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those over-the-top schemes,
I know.
her incompetence,
Mhm.
her bickering with Kronk.
So good.
It's just pure gold.
I know.
But there's something fascinating about a villain who's so unapologetically ambitious
Mm-hmm.
and power hungry,
Oh, yeah.
even if she goes about it in the most ridiculous way.
Totally. And a live action film could really lean into that comedic aspect, you know?
Yes.
Imagine the slapstick humor,
Oh, and
the witty dialogue,
Yeah.
the over-the-top costumes and sets.
Uh-huh.
It could be a visual feast.
It would be so good.
Yeah.
Plus, Yzma is a surprisingly strong female villain.
She is.
She's not afraid to take charge,
Right.
even if her plans are constantly backfiring.
Exactly.
It would be great to see that represented in a live-action film.
It-
Okay, let's go back to a villain who's a bit more cunning
Okay.
and manipulative.
All right.
Hans from Frozen.
Oh, Hans.
You know, that charming prince who turns out to be anything but...
I know, he's a classic.
He is.
You think he's a good guy.
Right.
And the-
Plot twist.
Yeah.
He's the villain.
He's a master manipulator.
He is.
He plays the role of the perfect prince so well
Mm-hmm.
that it makes his betrayal so shocking.
It really does.
Yeah, and a live-action film could really delve into that duality, you know, like
Right.
explore how he honed those skills of deception
Yes.
and what happened in his past to make him this way.
It's almost like he's playing a part, right?
Right.
Like he's learned how to charm and manipulate people to get what he wants.
Totally.
And the scariest part is there are people like that in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
You know, people who wear masks to hide their true intentions.
It's true. It's a little scary to think about.
It is.
But I think a live-action film could really explore those themes of deception and trust, showing how easily we can be fooled by appearances.
Yeah.
And it could be like a cautionary tale to remind us to be careful who we trust,
Yes.
especially those who seem too good to be true.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about villains who are cunning,
Mm-hmm.
villains who are ambitious,
Yeah.
villains who are terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how about a villain who's just plain fun?
Okay, I like it.
Madame Mim from The Sword and the Stone.
Oh, Mim.
What do you think?
She's just chaos.
She is.
Personified.
Yes.
Her magic is unpredictable.
Uh-huh.
Her personality is erratic.
Mhm.
She's a blast to watch.
She's like a force of nature.
She is.
You just never know what she's going to do next.
Right.
And can you imagine how amazing she would look
Oh, yeah.
in live action?
Yeah.
All those crazy transformations, the wild special effects,
Yeah?
the over-the-top duels with Merlin.
Oh, my God. It would be a visual feast.
It'd be so good.
Yeah. And I think a live-action film could really capture that sense of whimsy. Yeah.
It's a fun.
Yeah.
That makes Mim such a unique character.
Totally.
You know? It wouldn't be a dark and brooding film,
Right.
but it would just be full of energy and surprises.
It could be like a live-action cartoon almost.
Oh, yeah.
You know, full of color humor, those crazy over-the-top moments that make her so memorable.
Exactly. And it would be a great way to introduce her to a new generation.
Yes.
Show them that Disney villains can be just as entertaining as the heroes.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, so those are our top 10 picks
Okay.
for Disney villains who deserve their own live-action films.
Awesome.
But before we wrap things up,
Okay.
we wanted to mention a few contenders
All right.
who just missed the cut.
Okay.
You know, these are villains with stories just waiting to be told,
Yeah.
with mysteries begging to be unraveled.
I like it.
So one that stands out to me is Dawn Bellwether.
Oh, from Zootopia?
Yes.
The sheep.
The sheep.
Yeah.
She seems so meek and unassuming,
Right.
but then bam,
Yeah.
she's revealed as the mastermind behind this whole conspiracy. I know, it's crazy.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But we know surprisingly little about her backstory
Right.
and her motivations.
It's true.
So I think a live action film could really dig into her past,
Okay.
explore what events shaped her worldview
Yeah.
and drove her to such extreme measures.
Like, why is she doing this?
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be fascinating to see her character explored in greater depth
Oh, yeah.
and maybe even challenge our perceptions of innocence and guilt,
That's interesting.
right? Like, what if we start to understand her motivations,
Okay.
even sympathize with her in a way?
Yeah.
I think that's what makes a good villain.
What?
That ability to make you question your own assumptions,
Mhm.
to see things from a different perspective,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah.
It's all about blurring the lines between good and evil
Right.
and showing that even the most villainous characters have their own complexities and motivations.
That's what makes them so interesting.
It really is. And that's what makes exploring the world of Disney villains so much fun.
Totally.
It's not just about good versus evil.
Right.
It's about understanding the nuances of human nature,
Yeah.
the motivations that drive us, the choices we make, the consequences that follow.
Mm.
It's about finding those glimpses of humanity,
Right.
even in the darkest of characters.
It's true. Yeah, it's like they're not just one-dimensional bad guys, you know?
Right.
They're complex characters
Yeah.
with motivations and desires,
Uh-huh.
and even vulnerabilities that make them so much more compelling.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the idea of these live-action villain films so exciting.
Okay.
It's a chance to see these characters in a whole new light,
Yeah.
to really understand their stories more fully,
Mhm.
and maybe even challenge our own perceptions of good and evil.
Right. It's like, do these villains deserve their own stories?
Ooh.
Or does understanding their motivations make us sympathize with them a little bit?
That is such a good question. Like, on the one hand, you have villains like Frollo and Clayton,
Uh-huh.
whose actions are just, like, really hard to justify.
Right.
But then you have characters like Gothel and Hans,
Yeah.
who are more about manipulation and deception.
Totally.
It's like they're playing a different game altogether.
Yeah, it's not always a clear-cut case of good versus evil.
Right.
There are those shades of gray, those complexities and motivations that we might not even realize until we delve deeper into their stories.
I think a lot of it comes down to our own individual perspectives, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what we consider evil might be shaped by our own experiences, our beliefs,
Totally.
even the stories we've been told.
Right, and that's what makes these discussions so interesting.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just talking about Disney villains here.
Right.
We're talking about human nature,
Mm-hmm.
the choices we make, the things we value, and the consequences that follow.
It's almost like these villains hold up a mirror to ourselves,
Ooh,
you know,
I like that.
forcing us to confront our own shadows, our own potential for darkness.
That's a powerful thought.
Right.
It makes me wonder, what if by exploring the darkness, we actually gain a greater appreciation for the light?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, you can't know the light without understanding the darkness.
Exactly.
Mm.
And maybe that's part of the reason why we're so drawn to these villains.
Right?
They represent something within ourselves that we might not want to acknowledge,
Mhm.
but that we can't help but be fascinated by.
So what does this all mean for our potential live-action villain movies?
Okay.
I think it means that these films could be so much more
Yeah.
than just simple retellings of classic stories.
Right.
They could be opportunities for us to explore complex themes, challenge our assumptions,
Mhm.
and maybe even see ourselves reflected in the characters on screen.
It's a chance to reimagine these classic stories.
Yes.
For a new generation to add layers of depth and nuance and to spark conversations about the things that really matter.
I love that. It's not just about entertainment.
Right.
It's about using these stories as a way to connect with each other,
Yeah.
to understand ourselves better,
Yeah.
and maybe even make the world a little bit brighter
Okay.
by confronting the darkness.
Well said.
So out of all the villains we've talked about today,
Okay.
which one do you think is the most deserving of their own live-action film?
Oh, that's a tough one. There are so many good contenders.
No.
I think for me, it would have to be Dr. Facilier.
Okay.
I mean, that New Orleans setting, the voodoo magic, the music, it could be truly spectacular.
It really could.
What about you?
You know, after all this talk about good versus evil and the complexities of human nature, I think I'm finding myself drawn to the idea of a Mother Gospel movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think her story has so much potential to explore,
Yeah.
you know, those darker aspects of human behavior.
Right.
The manipulation, the narcissism,
Yeah.
the desire for control.
I love that choice.
Yeah.
It would be a very different kind of villain film. More psychological and character-driven,
Right.
but it could be incredibly powerful.
Yes.
And it would definitely be a conversation starter.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're hoping for with all of these potential villain films.
Yeah.
To spark conversations, to challenge our perspectives,
Mhm.
and to remind us that there's always more to the story
Right.
than meets the eye.
Well said. And I think that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yes, we have.
From the Gothic streets of Paris to the shadowy bayou of New Orleans, and from Neverland to Mount Olympus.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've talked about villains who are cunning, villains who are terrifying, villains who are hilarious,
Yeah.
and villains who make us question our own assumptions about good and evil.
And we've explored the idea that maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
by understanding the darkness, we can gain a greater appreciation for the light.
So what are your final thoughts on this whole villain discussion?
My final thought is villains are often the most memorable characters in a story.
Yeah.
because they challenge us, they provoke us,
Mm-hmm.
and they force us to confront the complexities of the world.
I love that. And I think it's a great reminder that there's always more to discover,
Yeah.
more to understand, and more to appreciate about the stories we love.
Right.
Even the villains have something to teach us.
And sometimes those lessons are the most valuable ones of all.
Okay, so we've explored all these wicked Disney villains.
Yeah.
And how their stories could totally hold their own on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
But here's a thought.
Okay.
Every hero needs a worthy opponent, right?
That's true.
Like without a villain to push them to test their limits.
Yeah.
Would the hero's journey even be as exciting?
It's a good point.
It's that clash of
It is.
ideologies, the struggle between good and evil that really makes these stories resonate.
Yes.
And often I think the villain's motivations actually reveal things about the hero.
That we wouldn't see otherwise.
That's interesting. Okay, so think about those classic pairings.
Okay.
Hercules and Hades,
Right.
Peter Pan and Captain Hook.
Yeah.
Even Bill and Gaston in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the hero's strengths and weaknesses are often mirrored
Okay.
in the villain that they face.
It's true.
It's almost like the villain acts as like a catalyst,
Uh-huh.
forcing the hero to grow and evolve.
Yeah, like Simba in The Lion King.
Oh, yeah.
It's Scar's treachery that ultimately pushes Simba
Yes.
to take his rightful place as king.
Exactly. And without a villain to overcome.
Yeah.
Would we even recognize the hero's heroism?
That's a good question.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, who would Hercules be without Hades to challenge him?
He'd just be a strong guy with a cool family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the conflict, the struggle
Right.
that really defines him.
Yeah.
And going back to our list of villains,
Okay.
maybe that's what makes them so compelling
Yeah.
as potential subjects for live-action films. They force us to ask those tough questions,
Yeah.
see things from different perspectives, and maybe even reconsider our own definitions of good and evil.
And those questions are always more interesting when you're dealing with characters who aren't just black and white,
Right.
good or bad.
Exactly.
The best villains are the ones with layers.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who make you think, well, maybe I can see where they're coming from.
Like with Mother Gothel.
Yeah.
On the surface, she's this manipulative, narcissistic woman
Right.
who imprisons Rapunzel.
Uh-huh.
But then you think about her obsession with youth and beauty
Yeah.
and how that might stem from societal pressures
Okay.
or even her own insecurities.
Right.
And it makes you question, is she truly evil or just deeply flawed?
It's interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
And those shades of gray
Right.
are what make these characters so fascinating to explore.
It's not about condoning their actions,
Yeah, right.
but it's about understanding what drives them, what makes them tick.
And I think that's where the real potential for these live-action villain films lies.
Oh.
It's not just about giving them a backstory
Yeah.
or justifying their actions.
Yeah.
It's about using their stories to explore the complexities of human nature and the choices we make.
Yeah, and maybe encourage a little introspection. Make us think, what would I do in that situation? What choices would I make?
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Disney villains,
Right.
let's turn the question back over to you.
Okay.
Which Disney villain do you think deserves their own time in the spotlight?
Yeah.
Whose story are you most eager to see unfold on the big screen?
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps more importantly, what do you think their story could teach us
Okay.
about ourselves, about the world, and about the nature of good and evil?
Interesting.
Think about it and share your thoughts with us on social media.
Yeah.
Let's keep this conversation going.
And remember, there's always more to learn,
Yes.
more to discuss, and more to uncover. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories
Yeah.
that captivate you.
Until next time, keep those imaginations running wild.
Yeah.
Who knows what fascinating topics we'll deep dive into next?